Kyle. How are you?
I am fantastic, Nathan. How are you doing?
Doing really well. Doing surprisingly well for a Thursday afternoon. Usually
Good.
end of the week, start crashing, but I feel great. And you too? You a new baby, but you're fresh faced, smiling, seem full energy?
Just full of caffeine.
No, okay. That works. All right. Let's dive right into it. People are busy. They don't have time to listen to us chat about babies. Today we're talking about specialist bloat, a very specific type of bloat that's accruing among GTM teams. So let's dive in. Why don't you tell me just about what specialist bloat is when we say specialist bloat, when the market says specialist bloat?
Yeah, so it's important, I think, to go back in time a little bit and revisit how did we get here? And like many things that are plaguing companies in 2024, how we got here is an artifact of the zero interest rate era, where two things happened. One, Nathan, companies were hyper rewarded for growth. So this is what private investors were looking for. This is what public investors were looking for. The growth rate of your revenue was the main consideration for your valuation. So that's point one. Point two, money was very cheap. It was relatively easy for companies to raise money and then spend money. Okay, so those two things combined meant growth at all costs, because that's what is determining the value of our company. And we have all this free money that we need to deploy. So how are we going to deploy it? Well, let's deploy it in ways that are going to help yield more growth for the company. So this is a long way of saying companies got used to being able to afford all sorts of different specialized roles across their go-to-market teams that were helping them achieve more growth. Now, the problem is that growth rate hit some sort of limit at some point where additional investments into personnel were not yielding commensurate returns with the growth rate. But that mattered way less in the zero interest rate era because, again, growth was all that mattered. And even if the growth rate was slowing down and the return on investment was not increasing or keeping up, that was okay. As long as your top line growth was okay, you were okay. This led to a lot of go-to-market bloat, specifically with personnel and hyper-specialized personnel, where today, in 2024, you cannot get away with your investments not yielding commensurate returns. And so that's what companies need to focus on. When I'm deciding to spend money on personnel, I need to make sure that that investment in that person is yielding dramatic returns. That person is going to provide a lot of leverage. And if they're not going to be able to affect our growth and drive more revenue and make us more efficient, all those things, I need to rethink the spend on that person. So that's where we are today. That was a very long answer.
No, that was a great answer. And I think you just had a wonderful conversation with Kyle Poyar, if I'm saying that incorrectly, around ARR per employee being a very crucial metric right now, which I would encourage people to go check out.
Exactly. Yeah. Kyle Poyer from OpenView. He's an operating partner at OpenView, and he's got a great point of view on how to think about efficiency or efficiently running a business. And the metric that he suggests companies use is ARR per full-time employee. And he has all the benchmarks and everything that you need to understand how are you situated against other companies your size and what does good look like? What does great look like? All these things. So he's a gem. And he was on our podcast recently. What a guy.
It was an awesome conversation. Yeah, if you're listening to this, go check out that one next. Sorry, I butchered his last name. Would you say his name one last time for me? And where?
Kyle Poyer.
There it is. Okay, Kyle Poyer. Okay, so jumping back on track here. One of the things I find interesting with specialist bloat is there are different types of bloat, of course, but we're not just talking, it's not just expensive because it's their salary, right? There are other ramifications of bringing specialists into your team that go beyond just salary, right?
100%. Yeah. So what ends up, let's actually stick with salary for a moment, just because I just want to hammer this point home. And it's salary, but it's also what a lot of companies think of, they'll call fully burdened employees. So it's a salary, yes, but it's also insurance and benefits and all the other things, the perks, all that stuff that adds up. And so, a 100K salary ends up looking more like 150 to 170K fully burdened. So you have to keep that in mind when you're calculating return on investment. Nevertheless, one of the reasons why I want to focus on salary is because a lot of companies got this kind of backwards in the zero interest rate era, where they saw a playbook that another company was running, and without thinking too hard about it, they said, we're going to try and run that same playbook here. And an example that's near and dear to my heart is the example of the sales development rep. The sales development rep, or SDR, is a model that works really well for certain types of companies and is completely irresponsible for other types of companies to run. What do I mean by that? For you to afford an SDR model, and the SDR is kind of that intermediary between the marketing team and the sales team, qualifying leads, setting up meetings, doing that. You need to have a really high value product. You need to have a high ACV and high close rates. Otherwise, if you're selling a 10K product, per year, 10K ARR product, you can't actually justify having an SDR there that's generating a handful of opportunities per week. It just doesn't make sense. The math doesn't make sense. If you have a high ACV, 100K, 250K, whatever it is, average contract value, then you can start to afford that more specialist intermediary who's qualifying leads, setting up meetings, that type of thing. So you have to be mindful about the type of business model that you are, and you have to take with a grain of salt the types of playbooks that you're seeing other companies run, because they won't always apply to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm also stuck on the fact that for me as an employee, I think of them as perks, and for managers, they think of as burdens, fully burdened. I love that phrase. Okay, so fully burdened employee. But you're right, the math doesn't add up. And when money costs nothing and there was zero interest, you could get away with doing that because you wouldn't have to pay the piper until however many years down the road. But now investors are thinking very differently, right? They want to see that ARR per employee being positive and seeing each employee pulling their weight effectively. Okay, so we have the fully burdened. Do you still want to stick on salary, or do you want to move to the ramifications beyond that? Yeah, let's
Yeah,
dive.
so what you were hinting at before, Nathan, is okay, so you have these people, they're expensive people. Okay, great. Now, what's the other problem with having so many specialists? You'll hear this a lot from teams that are trying to optimize some sort of process, a buying process in particular. They talk about the handoffs that exist between their teams. Now, a lot of people think about that handoff process when it's literally about who is the buyer meeting with. So they met with the sales development rep. Now they're meeting with the account executive. Now they're meeting with the sales engineer. Now they're a customer and they're meeting with an implementation consultant. Now they're meeting with a customer success person. Now they're meeting with an account manager. It's like, Jesus Christ, how many different people does it take for us to close and retain one customer? Now, bring that even further up the funnel and think about all the marketing types of things, touch points that exist there. You have the person that's writing the blog post, that's managing the website, that's running the ads, that's doing the account-based marketing. That, like, it just adds up to this tremendous amount of bloat where you have all these different people that are responsible for the process of turning a buyer into a customer. And so these processes become very cumbersome. These processes become very convoluted. These processes become very bloated. And it is exacerbated if you have different specialists that manage every single point of that supply chain. This assembly line way of thinking about the marketing and sales funnel is crazy. And it just doesn't make sense anymore because that's not how buyers buy. And so, in order to overcome this specialist bloat, you need to think differently about the type of people that you bring in and the type of processes that you run. And you need to give more latitude to individual people to have more influence, to have more control over larger parts of that process so that you can reduce the complexity of the processes, reduce that bloat. You can streamline the experience from a customer and buyer standpoint, and you can reduce the amount of people that are required for you to get a buyer into a customer. And if you can focus on that and really think differently about how are we going to get this done, whatever the process is, then you'll be thinking in a new type of way, a first principles type of way that's going to require you to probably tear some things down in order to build it back up. And now the punchline is you can do a lot of this with AI. AI can fill in, it can be the stitching for the quilt and make it all really work together seamlessly in ways that you never could before. So you really need to consider where are there areas where we can A, give people more latitude, more responsibility, more of a horizontal purview, B, reduce the complexity of the processes that we're running, and C, offload a lot of it to AI and see what we can do to drive more efficiency and productivity for our teams.
Oh man, this just really hit home. I know we've been talking a lot about sales, but from a marketing standpoint, the handoff process, I was always wondering why a post costs $2,000 until I learned that it's because the strategist needs to send it to someone to make the brief, who needs to send it to the editor, who gets it to the writer, who sends it back to the editor, who gets it to the copywriter, who then sends it for publishing. It's out of control how many people it takes to make one blog post that we've been making with single workflows, but that's a digression.
Well, it's
So,
not a digression though, Nathan, because now that was the only way to get something done. And so like thought leadership is such a good example. Thought leadership content is such a good example of this where it requires like To do real thought leadership, you need real thought leaders. Most companies are not willing to invest the time that it takes for those thought leaders to actually get their thoughts into or onto paper for writing. And so what do? Okay, old school process. Our CEO is an expert. He's been in this industry for 10 years. We want to get his thoughts out and we want him to be a thought leader, posting blog posts, doing LinkedIn stuff, all that. Okay, how do we do that? We either don't do it because the CEO is just not going to take time to do it, or this is what most teams do. They interview their CEO like once a quarter for 30 minutes. They end up with 6 bullet points on articles that they want to write. And then they go and farm those articles out to hopefully somebody that has some sort of subject matter expertise and can kind of write in that CEO's voice, but we don't really know. 6 months later, you now have 6 different posts that you can go write and publish in that CEO's name. And like, does that really move the needle? Probably not. So then most companies give up. Most CEOs get they lose faith in the whole process and they don't do it again. Fast forward to what we can do now. Now what we can do is we can interview the CEO for 10 minutes. She can give us all of her great thoughts on the subject matters that she has expertise on. We can run that transcript through an AI workflow. The AI workflow writes the article in the CEO's voice, or her voice is maintained. And now we have that thought leadership article in minutes instead of months. And it requires far fewer people, internal contractors, agencies, all the rest, and it's all done automatically. So, and there's a million different use cases that we could talk through, but that one is so top of mind because it's such a painful or non-existent process for so many companies, and it's so easy to solve. And you solve the specialist bloat, you solve the process bloat, and you create value for customers in a fast way, and that's the name of the game.
And for anyone listening who just wants some proof in the pudding, it's currently a Thursday right now. On Monday and Tuesday, sat down with our leadership team, had 15 to 20 minute conversations, recorded them with the Copy.ai bot. Those transcripts were sent right to the workflow, and we had 9 posts ready and loaded for our blog with accompanying videos by Thursday. I almost don't know what to do tomorrow. I shouldn't tell you that. I'm kidding. I know. I have plenty. Okay, so I want to, before the time gets too far along and away from us, when you came on board, we were talking about roles and titles, and you fought for me to take the title Head of Content Strategy instead of Head of Content. And it took me a few months to realize how, maybe I'm saying this, you were future-proofing that role for me, so I owe you a thanks. What's the difference and why does it matter? And how is it going to impact future teams?
Sure. Yeah. So the content versus content strategy. Well, first, I should say, like, I didn't just bestow a title on you, Nathan. This is having worked with you, seeing what you're capable of, and then making sure that the leverage that you could provide to the company was fully understood by the company by virtue of the title that you had. And so the way of thinking about content strategy versus just content is AI is very useful, as we just talked about that use case for thought leadership content, very useful for many things, creating content, one of those things. However, you cannot outsource this strategy. So, what do I want you, Nathan, spending time on? I want you spending time on the content strategy. What is the category that we're creating? What is the language that we're trying to take to the market? What is our SEO presence and how is that driving traffic to our website? Once folks are on our website, what are they looking at and what's converting and what isn't? Like, you need to have a strategic viewpoint, and that's just 3 channels. There are many more, as you know. So you need to have a strategic viewpoint on all of these things. But then the next step from there is, I don't want you spending a full day writing a 1,500 word blog post. That doesn't make any sense. You're way too valuable. That's not where the leverage is. What I want you to do is design the workflows that create the blog post. So you can spend an hour creating that workflow and then run that workflow for the rest of your life to satisfy what we need on the blog post for SEO, or what we need on social for thought leadership, or what we need on the website for conversion. All those types of things is strategically thought about by you and then executed by AI. And that's what content strategy is, in my opinion. And I think that's what you've been delivering really nicely on. So that's the vision, and you're making it a reality.
Well, I appreciate it. The platform makes it really easy to do, so I don't want to take too much credit either. I got in the middle there. All right, this is what I would imagine would be very pressing on people's minds right now. Let's say I am a specialist,
Sure.
and over the past 5 years, I've become a specialist in this particular role in SaaS. Is my time up? What would you recommend I do to future-proof my career?
It's a great question, Nathan. So we'll go back to the near and dear example to my heart of the sales development rep, many of whom correctly see their role as, if not being killed, then certainly evolving. And you need to evolve with it. And so what does that mean? because the SDR, in my opinion, because the SDR role is going away at many companies, it does not mean that the function of outbound sales or outbound marketing is going away. It's just that we're going to execute it differently. This, believe it or not, is a good thing for SDRs. And the reason I say this, I was an SDR myself for 18 months. I've worked with thousands of them. What 999 out of 1,000 of them have in common is they don't want to be SDRs. They want to move into some other role inside the company. Now, why is that? Because the work itself is relatively repetitive. You can get very good at it in 3 to 6 months. And after that, you feel like you've kind of plateaued and you're not challenged anymore. Most people want it to be challenged. They want to have a broader, deeper impact on the company. And that's what the future is going to allow you to do if you do these couple things. One, you need to upskill yourself. You need to challenge yourself to really think about where are there gaps in your aptitude and how can you go fill those gaps for whatever it is that you're interested in. We'll just keep using the SDR example right now. If you're in an SDR role, you have exposure to sales, to marketing, to operations, to finance, to all these different functions in your business. It's up to you to determine which of these paths is most interesting to you. And then what do I need to do to close the gap between where I am now and where I want to be from a skill standpoint to go and pursue a career? So upskilling is a huge part of this. The second part of it is, this is true for everybody, is like understanding how to work with people, the psychology of people, how people make decisions, how to present well, how to communicate well. The soft skills are really important. You can take soft skills and you can leverage them into pretty much anything. So this is a very long way of saying, again, invest in yourself. Be intentional about your career. Don't be scared by getting replaced by AI. See how you can leverage AI to offload some of the more rote, mundane, repetitive work that is maybe slowing you down right now, to unlock time for you to go and study, to be a student, to learn new things, or to build new aptitudes, or to sharpen some skill set. It's not impossible. It's just going to take you to be intentional, to lean in, to take the time to do it. So I'm a big believer that AI is going to unlock more opportunity for people than it's going to destroy. But it is going to destroy certain ways of how we currently do work, just like the way that the internet did, just like the way the computer did, just like the way the mobile phone did. It creates so much more opportunity than it destroys those. So you just got to be well positioned to take advantage of that opportunity creation, and everybody's going to be just fine as long as you lean in and you do the work.
It's funny you say that. I had a brief stint as an SDR for about 4 months. And when I started, I was really excited because it did seem like such a cool skill. The problem was, after about 2 months, like you said, I had the skill for that role and it wasn't a challenge and I wasn't excited anymore because I was like, oh, so I'm just waking up and doing this over and over and over and hoping somebody responds and then I'm going to pass off that guy. If I'd had what we have now, the technology, free up to think about strategy. How do I make these conversations meaningful? How do I come to these calls more prepared? It's really
To learn more like sales skills, to learn how to run a discovery call, to qualify, to negotiate, to work with internal stakeholders, to manage a deal cycle, to listen to call recordings and actually understand how deals get done inside your company. These are things that SDRs right now just don't have time to do. Now you have time. Now the question is, what are you going to do with that time? And the same is true for hyper specialists across every other function: marketing, operations, finance, customer success, etc. If your purview is super narrow, you need to find ways to broaden it. And you can do this. It just requires you to take the bull by the horns. You can't expect somebody to just extend the olive branch and bring you along. You've got to be the one pushing to go and learn. And if you do that, you're going to be fine.
Tough love by Kyle Coleman. What a great way to end it. I love it. I feel like, man, dude, your kid's going to get the best advice ever. That's great. This is amazing. This is wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. As always, if people want to get in touch with you, LinkedIn would be the place to do it. If they have questions about GTM.AI or how to use the GTM.AI platform, you would be the person to contact?
Yeah, reach out on LinkedIn. I'll do what I can. If you're curious to learn more about how you can leverage AI across your go-to-market engine, Copy.ai is our website, and you'll, I think, find everything you need there. If not, you can blame Nathan.
Always blame Nathan. All right. What a great way to end it. Thank you so much, Kyle. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.